I didn't used to cry easy. Not when Pop passed. Not even when my baby brother got taken by fever before he ever learned to crawl. But that afternoon, with my feet sunk in the cold black mud of Grady's Hollow, all I could do was sob so hard I near choked on it. The river was high from the autumn rains, rolling fast and brown under a slate sky. Folks said it had taken more than one soul over the years, washed them away clean, without fuss or farewell. That was what I wanted. No note, no scream, just to be done. My shawl was soaked through, and the hem of my dress clung to my legs. I'd torn it running from the chapel yard after Miss Gertie Ray slapped me in front of the whole Ladies' Aid Society. Said I was a serpent in their garden. A temptress. Her voice cracked when she said it, like she'd been waiting to hiss that word at someone for years. I hadn't done anything but ask for food. They didn't see me as a girl trying to survive. They saw sin in my ribs, shame in my bare feet. So I walked out past the livery, past the edge of town where grass gave way to dirt and the road vanished into scrub. I found the river bend and knelt beside it, my knees sinking into the cold earth. I opened my prayer book. It was Pa's once, cracked leather, his name worn down on the inside cover. I meant to write something, but all I did was press the pencil there and shake. That's when I heard the creak of a saddle and the slow breath of a horse. I didn't turn. If you're fixing to cross, miss, a man's voice said, low and rough, best do it upstream, where the current don't drag you like a mule team. He didn't say it mean, just stated it, calm-like, as though remarking on the weather. I still didn't look at him, just wiped my face and waited for him to go. He didn't. After a while, he said, ain't nothing in that river you ain't already faced. Whatever it took from you, it ain't got no right to keep the rest. I turned then, just enough to see his boots, dusted with clay and years of use, and the hem of a long duster. His horse stood quiet behind him, rein slack. You don't know me, I said. He tipped his hat. Don't have to. I seen that look before. He finally stepped around, slow and respectful, until I could see his face. He wasn't young, nor old, somewhere in the hard middle. His jaw was shadowed with stubble, and his eyes, well, they looked like mine must have. Hollowed by grief, rimmed with cold. He offered a hand, big and calloused, not soft like the banker's son who tried to kiss me once behind the dry goods store. This man didn't reach to lift me, just held it there, steady. I got a place up yonder. Ain't much, but it's dry. There's beans on the stove and coffee too bitter to pretend otherwise. A beat. You want to come? I stared at his hand, then at the river, then back at his hand. He didn't flinch. My name's Clara, I whispered. Wesley Carradine, he said, like he wasn't sure the name still fit him. The wind picked up. I took his hand. His grip was firm. He pulled me up without effort and didn't let go till I steadied. I expected questions. Where was I from? What did I do? Was I running from something? But he didn't ask, just guided me to his horse and helped me up behind the saddle like it was the most natural thing. We didn't speak on the ride. The sky bruised purple, and the first flakes of snow began to fall. I leaned into his back, felt the warmth of him through his coat. It was the first human warmth I'd known in weeks. His homestead sat low beneath a windbreak of cottonwoods. One main house, a shed, and fencing that had seen better days. He dismounted and held the reins while I climbed down, legs stiff. He opened the door, nodded for me to go first. Inside, the fire crackled low, and the room smelled of ash, horsehair, and something faintly sweet, maybe apples drying on a string near the stove. A pot simmered just like he said. I'll sleep in the barn, he said, setting his hat on a peg. Room's through there if you want it. You don't have to. I know. He handed me a folded blanket. You can stay as long as you need. My throat tightened. Why were you helping me? He paused, looked at the fire like it held an answer. My wife died last spring, he said. Fever took her. Took our little girl, too. I've been alone since. Quiet ain't so peaceful as folks think. I didn't say sorry. Sorry don't carry weight with folks who lost something they can't name without choking. So I nodded, sat down near the fire, held the blanket close. Thank you, I whispered. He didn't answer, just stirred the beans and set out 2 bowls. That night, I lay under a roof I didn't build and prayed for the first time in months. Not for a miracle, just for the strength to believe this wasn't a dream. And when the wind howled outside, I didn't flinch. Because there was a man in the barn with sorrow in his bones and kindness in his silence. And, somehow, that was enough to make me want to see morning. The morning broke pale and gray, the kind of sky that never quite makes up its mind. I woke tucked into a bed too clean to be lived in, beneath a quilt patched with delicate stitches and old love. The room smelled of cedar and faint lilac, and I knew, without asking, it had once belonged to his wife. I sat up slow, half expecting someone to come in and scold me. But the house was quiet, save for the crackle of kindling catching fire in the next room. I folded the quilt, smoothed the pillow, and stepped into my boots. They were still wet, but I didn't mind. I'd been colder. In the kitchen, Wesley stood by the stove, shirt sleeves rolled, ladling coffee into a tin cup. He didn't startle when he saw me, just nodded toward the second cup he'd set out. "There's bread, if you want it. Bit dry." "I'm not particular," I said, sitting down. My voice sounded different here, less brittle. We ate in silence, save for the scrape of tin and the whistle of wind. When I looked up, he was watching me, not with suspicion like most men did, but like he was trying to place me on some invisible map. "Where I came from, where I broke. I can earn my keep," I said. "You got chores need doing, I can do 'em." He didn't answer right away, just sipped his coffee, then finally nodded. "The place has been quiet too long. Gets dusty. Things fall apart when no one minds 'em." I stood and took my plate to the basin. "Then I'll mind him." He gave a short nod again, then grabbed his coat and went outside, boots thudding across the porch. I spent the morning sweeping floors, clearing cobwebs, and folding linens that had yellowed from disuse. I found a stack of tiny dresses tucked into a chest, worn soft from years of washing. I held one up, pressed it to my cheek. My heart ached, not just for the child who'd worn them, but for the man who'd folded them away and left them untouched. By noon, the house had begun to hum again, quiet but living. I baked what I could from what little he had, flatbread with wild sage I found growing near the fence line. It wasn't much, but it warmed the air. Wesley came in from the fields, face ruddy with wind and sun, and gave a small smile when he saw the table. "You didn't have to." "Neither did you," I replied, and that was all that needed saying. After lunch, he handed me a brush and a can of linseed oil. Rocking chair on the porch is near worn through. Thought it might like some attention. I took it gladly, and while I worked, he fixed a busted hinge on the barn door. We moved like clock hands, never quite touching, but ticking towards something inevitable. As the sun lowered, casting gold across the yard, a rider appeared on the road. Dust clung to his coat like second skin. Wesley stiffened. I saw the twitch in his jaw before the man even dismounted. "Carradine," the stranger called, voice too friendly to be kind. "Deputy Harmon," Wesley said, walking out slow. "Don't see what business you've got out here." I stepped behind the doorframe, but kept close enough to hear. "Town's been talking," Harmon said. "Says you've taken in some stray. Girl with no family, no name, no shoes. You think that's wise? She's not your concern." Harmon chuckled, but there was no mirth in it. "You think you can just pull in a girl off the road? No questions asked and not stir the waters?" Gertie Ray's mighty vocal. "Says the girl's trouble." I stepped onto the porch before I meant to. "I've caused no harm," I said, voice shaking. "I only wanted to be left alone." Harmon's eyes found me and narrowed. "That's so? You're Clara Dumlin, ain't you?" Thought I recognized that jaw. My blood ran cold. "She's here now," Wesley said, stepping between us. "And she's not alone. Folks might not like that." Wesley stared at him, unmoved. "Let him try." Harmon spat near the post and climbed back on his horse. "You always did like to dig your heels in. Don't say I didn't warn you." We watched him ride off until he vanished beyond the cottonwoods. "I should go," I said, heart hammering. "They'll come. I'm not worth the trouble." "You leave, they'll still talk," he said. "Stay, and we can talk back louder." I blinked hard. "Why do you care?" He looked at me, eyes dark and tired. "Because the day I buried Lena and our girl, I swore the house would never hold joy again. But you've changed the air, like opening a window." My hands trembled, but not from cold. "I'm not clean, Wesley. I've made mistakes. People believe things about me that ain't true, and some that are." He said softly. The wind picked up again, rustling the dry grass and the hanging quilt I'd pinned to the line. "I ain't asking for anything," I whispered. "But I am," he said. He reached for my hand. His was rough and warm, the kind of warmth that didn't burn but settled deep. "I can't say the words just yet," he added. "But I'll say this much. Stay. Not out of pity, not to be beholden. Stay because the house knows your footstep now. So do I." I didn't answer right away. Just closed my fingers around his, and, for the first time, didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. I felt present, solid. Later, as we sat on the porch and watched the stars come out one by one, I let my head rest against his shoulder. "I don't know what this is," I murmured, "but I'm not afraid." He didn't speak, only laid his hand over mine again. And the silence between us wasn't empty. It was full. The days turned colder. Frost kissed the windows each morning, and I learned the rhythm of Wesley's world, splitting wood before sunup, milking the stubborn old goat he never bothered to name, and tending the little plot of turnips that clung to life like it still hoped for spring. We moved around each other like hands remembering a dance. No declarations, just small kindnesses stitched into the hours. I kept expecting the warmth to fade, that the quiet between us would crack, or he'd change his mind. But each morning, there was coffee in the same cup, set out just so. Each evening, he'd hand me a bowl before serving himself. Sometimes we spoke, not about the past, we still carried that like stones in our pockets, but about the world in front of us. The barn roof needed patching. The fence needed mending. There was always something to fix, and in fixing things, we fixed ourselves a little too. Still, there was a shadow. Deputy Harmon had stirred more than dust with his visit. I felt it when I walked to the well. Eyes I couldn't see watching from the woods. Whispers clung to me even out here, and though Wesley never said so, I could tell he knew. His grip tightened just slightly on the hammer when a horse passed near the edge of the property. His eyes stayed on the tree line longer than they used to. One night, as I brought in the last of the laundry, I found him staring at a photograph. It was worn from handling, him, his wife, and their little girl, both women smiling, caught in summer sun. "She looks like you," he said quietly, setting it down as I entered. I folded a shirt. "I've never had a picture taken. You should. So there's proof you were here." I sat beside him on the bench by the fire. "I don't feel like I'm hiding anymore. But sometimes, I still don't feel real." "You are," he said. "You're more real than anything that's stayed in this house since I buried them." His words didn't need dressing. They stood on their own, rough-edged and true. That was the night he kissed me. Not hurried, not like a man staking claim. Just a soft press of lips that lingered and asked, "Can I?" without needing to say it. I answered with the way I leaned into him. After that, something shifted. Not louder, not more dramatic, but solid. Like a foundation had settled into place. The next morning, he didn't ride out to the ridge like usual. Instead, he hitched the wagon. "Where are we going?" I asked, pulling on my boots. "To town." My heart thudded. "Wesley." He turned, eyes steady. "You've been hiding too long. You're with me now. Let him look." I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't that simple, but it was to him, and maybe to me, too. We arrived just past noon. Folks stopped and stared as we passed. I felt their gazes rake over me. Me in one of Lena's old dresses, my hair braided back, my chin lifted like it didn't tremble. Wesley walked beside me, his hand at the small of my back. At the general store, Harmon stood with Gertie Ray and a few others. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Well," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "The bride of Carradine finally shows her face." Wesley didn't pause. "She's not a ghost." Gertie sniffed. "A woman with her history has no place pretending decency." "Her history's hers," he said, voice low but unshakable. "But her future's mine." The words landed like thunder. Harmon stepped forward. "This ain't about you, Carradine. This is about what's right. You take her in, you make a mockery of every family that's buried a daughter who stayed pure. She was starving," Wesley said. "Your righteousness don't feed people. She did what she had to, and I'd choose her again every time." The store fell silent. The only sound was the creak of the sign above the door. "You marry her?" Harmon asked. Wesley looked at me. He hadn't asked, not out loud, but in his eyes I saw it again, that same steady offer he'd given me by the river. I will, he said. Today. Gertie scoffed. You'll regret it. Wesley took my hand. I haven't yet. We walked out together. My legs shook, but his grip steadied me. Back in the wagon, I didn't speak for a while. My heart roared in my chest like a wild horse. You sure about this? I asked at last, voice barely above the wind. I was sure the moment you didn't let go of my hand, he said. I looked out at the trees, blurring past. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I was riding towards something. That night, under a sky so wide it could swallow sorrow, he set a silver ring on my finger. Simple, worn. It had belonged to his mother. No preacher, he said. Just you, me, and the truth. I don't need more than that. Then say it, he whispered. I'm yours. He smiled. You're my bride now. And I said it back. I'm her bride now. Not because I was saved. Not because he fixed me. But because we'd found each other in the ashes and lit a fire that wouldn't go out. The first storm of winter rolled in the night after we said our vows. Thunder low and rumbling like it was speaking from the bones of the earth. I sat by the fire, mending one of Wesley's shirts, and watched the flames dance. He was in the next room, carving a cradle from cedar, one he'd started building before the grief had taken hold and left it half-finished in the barn rafters. I thought I'd burn it, he said softly when I found it, but my hands kept remembering the shape. Now, he sanded it smooth by lantern light. Not because I'd told him any news, I hadn't. We didn't speak of hopes before they had breath, but because something had shifted in both of us, and he was ready to believe again. That night, we held each other under layers of patched quilts, listening to the wind howl. My fingers traced the line of his jaw, the scar on his shoulder from some long-forgotten ranch brawl. He told me about the moment his daughter died, her breath slipping away like a candle in the wind, and how Lena didn't speak for days after. How she rode out one morning without a word and was found a week later, her horse grazing beside her body near the creek. I think she just couldn't carry it anymore, he whispered. She laid it down, and herself with it. I didn't cry. I just held him tighter. Sometimes, I said, I think sorrow's a kind of love that's run out of road. Then maybe love's a kind of sorrow that refuses to quit, he said. We fell asleep like that. Our griefs tangled but no longer choking us. The snow came fast. By morning, the yard was buried, the fence posts reduced to pale humps. We spent the next week mostly indoors, moving in quiet harmony. I read aloud to him from the Bible, and he taught me to patch the saddle leather. We cooked what we had, and when the biscuits ran low, he surprised me by trapping a rabbit and roasting it with wild onion. You're full of tricks, I teased. You'll learn I'm a man of many talents, he said, raising an eyebrow. But the world doesn't let joy go untested. It was near dusk when we heard the hooves, fast, frantic. I stepped onto the porch, lantern in hand, just as the rider reined in. It was Thomas Dyer, a boy from town who'd worked the telegraph for years. His face was pale under his hat. You got trouble, he said, breathless. Marshal Linton's coming, and he's bringing a judge. Wesley's shoulders tightened beside me. What for? They say Clara's wanted for consorting and fraud, Thomas said, looking at me with something like shame. Gertie's kin filed a complaint. Reckon it'll be a public hearing. I felt my knees start to give, but Wesley caught me. I'll go, I said quietly. I won't have them ruin you. You're not leaving, he said, fierce. You took me in, gave me your name. They'll say you harbored a criminal. He looked me dead in the eye. Then let them come. I'll stand beside you. The next morning, the town square was crowded. Snow turned to slush underfoot as the crowd murmured and pointed. I stood beside Wesley, hands folded tight, while Marshal Linton, gray-bearded and proud, read from a paper like it carried the weight of all heaven's law. She stands accused of seduction under false pretense, misrepresentation of identity, and moral endangerment of the community. None of that's true, Wesley said, calm but strong. The judge, a narrow-faced man with cold eyes, gestured. And you are? Her husband. Murmurs surged. Gertie made a loud noise of disgust. She preyed on your grief, Carradine, she snapped. She saw your broken heart and moved in like a vulture. Wesley stepped forward. No, I saw her broken first, and I asked her to stay. She gave me back the will to wake up in the morning. She brought laughter to a place that hadn't heard it in years. The judge looked at me. You have nothing to say in your defense? I cleared my throat, my voice thin but steady. I worked in a saloon, yes. I survived how I had to, but I never lied about who I was. I never took what wasn't offered freely. Wesley knew all of it, and still chose me. A long silence followed. Finally, the judge sighed. There's no legal standing for charges rooted in shame and assumption. If Carradine vouches for you, that's his right. Case dismissed. The crowd dispersed slowly, many not satisfied, but unable to argue the law. We rode home in silence, the sky pink with the promise of snow again. That evening, I sat beside Wesley on the porch. The cradle sat finished beside the door, gleaming faintly in the fading light. I didn't think we'd make it through that, I said. You think life owes us peace? He replied. It don't, but we can still fight for it. I reached for his hand. I don't want to run anymore. You won't, he said, pulling me close. Inside, the fire crackled. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt whole. I once thought my story would end on some muddy road, forgotten and discarded. But now I knew different. I was Clara Carradine, wife, survivor, and builder of quiet joy. And though the storms would come again, we'd face them together.